Okay, we are live, but we got to let it breathe. Hang tight, gang. Sorry to keep you waiting. I know we're always a little bit late, but we're especially late today because of yours truly. So apologies, but we're here now. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him, Zack Kelberman. Zack, it's kind of been a wild day of different pieces of news that are breaking and relative to the head coaching search for the Denver Broncos, it seems like things are beginning to crystallize, but I would not say that it's like we know what it's going to be. We know who it's going to be. There's reports here, there's reports there, but I loved your tweet showing the dominoes falling earlier today. First thing was, though, Frank Reich getting hired, scooped up by the Carolina Panthers. What's the latest you've heard on Sean Payton? And then what's this about Dan Quinn going back to the Cowboys?
To address the Dan Quinn story, he's staying in Dallas for another year. He turned down head coaching opportunities, and I would imagine he did that because he knows he's not getting any of the jobs. So it's a good get for the Cowboys and eliminates one candidate for the Broncos that not a lot of people really wanted. He would have been a non-sexy hire. The Sean Payton stuff, Chad, I am thoroughly exhausted. It's as the Payton turns every single day. It's like a soap opera. The latest, though, that we've can gather as of 6:30 Mountain Time, Sean Payton himself took to Twitter. I'll have a story about it coming to the website very, very soon. There was a report from the Washington Post that said there was an issue between Sean Payton and Broncos ownership in terms of a power struggle. Translation, Payton wants more power, or supposedly wanted more power than the Broncos are willing to offer. Well, Payton took to Twitter, which he hasn't, I believe it's his first tweet in 2023. And he said, he quoted the reporter and said, "Zero truth to this. We had a great visit and Broncos ownership was fantastic." There's two ways, in my opinion, you can read into this. Number one, he's still keeping himself alive for the Broncos job and he's kind of clearing his name. Or number two, it's almost like a parting message that's, thank you for the opportunity. I don't want to burn any bridges, but I had an 8-hour interview in Arizona today. I'm going to probably end up taking that job. So we'll see what happens tomorrow because things change by the hour, Chad.
Very, very interesting because Sean Payton, if previous reports were to be believed, just wasn't really feeling the Broncos. All that wave, that hyper wave of Sean Payton momentum dissipated. And then we started hearing little things like from Colin Cowherd, was it yesterday? These days are beginning to run together. This coaching search is like, I'm over it, just like y'all are over it. Okay. But Colin Cowherd all of a sudden taking to the airwaves, and we know he's especially close with Sean Payton. I'm not saying that, they're naming each other's kids after each other, but because they work so closely together at Fox Sports, they become buddies. Sean Payton, he's broken, has Colin Cowherd, Zach, a few different Sean Payton stories since his candidacy began in this hiring cycle. And if you guys can remember, last week we were talking about Colin Cowherd after meeting with Sean Payton in the immediate aftermath of the Broncos interview, saying things like Sean Payton likes the idea of working with Russ. Sean Payton relishes the opportunity of going to the AFC West, or would anyway, and competing with the Chiefs and the Chargers twice a year, to say nothing of the Raiders. All that stuff. Suddenly, 1 week later, Zach, literally yesterday, he's saying those same things. Now they're all the liabilities. Now, Sean doesn't want to go to New Orleans or to Denver because, Russ is a liability. He's lost his twitch. One NFL executive called him washed. And by the way, you'd have to compete against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert twice a year. It's like, dude, do you remember the things you say? Can you even keep them straight? So this is really interesting because I kind of began, Zach, writing Sean Payton off. But with Dan Quinn bowing out, Frank Reich taking one of the open jobs, hope remains possibly of the Broncos landing Sean Payton. It depends on what reporting you want to believe.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, no one really has a firm grasp on what's going on. No one really knows anything. I think it's down to Sean Payton and the front runner who's emerged in recent days. We haven't been on since Monday, and a lot has happened since then. DeMeco Ryans, the 49ers defensive coordinator, right now, according to some reporting, including Mike Kliss, has positioned him as the favorite. We have a story about it. Top choice, as Chad wrote earlier today for the website. That could be the guy here, and that could be why the Broncos are dragging their feet and not setting up any second interview, because nothing can really happen until next week when they can talk to Ryans again, as his team is playing in the NFC title game on Sunday. But, going back to that report from Mark Maskey or Mask, he said initially, you quoted, you talked about it on January 12th. He said the Broncos appear to be the early front runner. Payton likes the franchise's stable ownership and will be happy to work with Russell Wilson. Now, Maskey reported today he fears Payton does a potential power struggle with a member. I didn't catch this until just now.
Right.
A member of Broncos ownership. Is that Greg Penner, who's taking charge and taking the bull by the horns, or is that George Payton, who we know is safe as the Broncos general manager? Maybe Sean Payton wanted full control, full autonomy, and he's not getting that in Denver.
Let's lots to unpack here, lots to continue to sift through, but I want to say hello to those who have joined us in the chat. It's great to see each and every one of you. I see a bona fide Mount Rushmore Super Chat superstar in the house. She's been tied up. She's had some busy events, things going on in her life, but we've got her back tonight, and I know she's been in a few of the chats this week. So Michaela, the Duchess, in the house, love you, appreciate you. Thank you so much for this very, very generous super chat, and just know that we have missed you, and hopefully you know that. You and I corresponded, Michaela, on Twitter the last day or two, and it's great to keep in touch with you. She says, I really wanted Payton, but he would cost so much and would want total control. Ryans right now is hot with too many teams. I wish we could have gotten Harbaugh. So Michaela's kind of like, doesn't know whether to, or go blind. Like, what are you going to do here? Because I'm right there with her. At first it was, okay, Harbaugh bows out. And then I'm like, well, Sean Payton, 1A and 1B. Well, now the Sean Payton thing kind of got weird. My mind, Zach, initially went to Dan Quinn, but then now he's out. And it's like I said last week, I've said it a couple times over the last 2 weeks. There's a sneaking suspicion I have about DeMeco Ryans. And now, one of the most on point, Zach, Broncos insiders who you can pretty much set your watch to when it comes to these matters, Benjamin Albright, KOA Radio. He's been really hammering the DeMeco Ryans thing. And then, of course, Kliss comes out with the article. But what do you say to Michaela?
Well, first of all, Michaela, I know you've been busy the last few weeks or months with your personal business, which I won't air, but Scott and I coined a new nickname for you before the show, and that's Saint Michaela, because of how amazing you are. So we definitely appreciate you taking time out of your day and you being so generous. And I'd love to answer the question. I wish I had more insight and more clarity, but we're all clueless as to what really is going on. Michaela, you talk about Harbaugh. There's some in the media, some in the Broncos fan base that have their tinfoil hats on really tight and believe that Jim Harbaugh is still a possibility because he hasn't signed a new deal with Michigan, even though Harbaugh is going out and recruiting players to the Michigan football program. So I think that ship has sailed. It's a two-horse race. It has to be between Sean Payton, less likely, and now DeMeco Ryans looking more likely. The question becomes, if they do go with DeMeco Ryans, Chad, the OC hire would be more important to me than the head coaching hire. They have to get that right. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the next OC, if Ryans is the guy, is someone they've already talked to. So that would be either David Shaw or Jim Caldwell.
David Shaw would make a lot of sense. Pro style, West Coast. That's kind of what the personnel in Denver has been built around. But that doesn't mean you couldn't, stick your foot in the dirt and pivot to something different. Jim Caldwell, I mean, I'm trying to think of what his offenses looked like in Detroit, but when you think back to the Indy offenses with Peyton, it was basically the Peyton Manning offense that everybody knows and loves. Broncos fans are well aware and familiar with what that would look like. But the worst possible scenario for me here, and by the way, thank you for that super chat, my friend. If you want to throw that up, Scott, we'll grab them real quick. I hate to keep people waiting too much, but would be devolving to Raheem Morris. I know the Broncos were impressed in that interview, but he's the one guy I just don't want to hear that. Patriot Tex, brother, says, once again, the Broncos have found new ways to disappoint me. I had high hopes for these owners. Now, not so much. VJ Part 2 coming up. I fear. What do you say, Zach?
I saw that Dylan said what I'm about to say is, besides them being defensive coordinators and up-and-coming assistants, or VJ was at one time, they really have no similarities. Everything I've read, everything I've seen points to DeMeco Ryans actually being a true leader of men. He's like the rich man's version of Vance Joseph. He's what the Broncos thought they were getting in Vance Joseph. And the other big difference there, DeMeco Ryans was an all-pro and Pro Bowl player during his time. Vance was not that. He has a special way of relating to players, and look what he's done with that defense in just 2 years on the job, taking over for Robert Saleh. This is not Vance taking over the Miami Dolphins defense, and they finished that year 28th, 29th in total defense. DeMeco Ryans is leading the NFL's arguably best unit. So there really is no PTSD here from my point of view.
But I get what Patriot Tex is trying to say. He was hoping for an experienced coach. Experience meaning relative to the NFL head coaching ranks. And if you were going to get a consolation, the runner-up for me would be DeMeco Ryans. As far as people they've talked to, really, is he him and Evero are the only two guys who have not been head coaches before. You could include David Shaw, but he's been a head coach at least at Stanford. But I digress. I feel you, Patriot Tex, which is why I still think there's something to the Sean Payton thing, especially that tweet coming out. Very conspicuous, the timing of that. Sam Bam, brother, great to see you. Thank you for the super. He says, hey, Chad, Zach, I keep seeing conflicting reports about Payton and Ryans. I don't know. If they go with Ryans, does him being a defensive-minded head coach concern you? Go Broncos. It's a concern. I'm not going to lie. It would be a concern. You would have to then look at the other attributes that he brings to the table, from his leader of men stuff to his ability to manage other coaches, to spot, hire, identify the right guys to come in and be the offensive mind for your entering his age 35 season quarterback, Russell Wilson. So I would have some concerns, but there's also, guys, a lot to like. If the Broncos were to end up hiring DeMeco Ryans, and by the way, Houston's making a big push for him, if you believe reports too. So that's no guarantee, even if that's their guy. This is kind of unfolded strangely, for what it's worth. This hiring cycle has kind of been weird, but there's a lot to like, I think, Zach, about DeMeco Ryans, though. Again, the hire from a PR perspective and just a football perspective wouldn't come without its warts or its misgivings.
What hire wouldn't, though? I mean, even Sean Payton would have plenty of, potential red flags that we would have to talk about. DeMeco, though, if you all out there, if you like Mike Tomlin, then that's what I anticipate DeMeco Ryans' ceiling looking like. Mike Tomlin is one of the best, and even Kliss wrote about that. You're talking about stability, you're talking about consistency, and you're talking about going back to being a winning, respectable franchise. I understand another first-timer. I understand the inexperience. He's 38 years old, but that's why I propose the Broncos hire Caldwell, who's almost 70, or David Shaw, who's been a college head coach. He's been an NFL assistant. These guys have experience. So someone that can help DeMeco Ryans and kind of babysit him and not have an all rookie or inexperienced staff like the Broncos had last year. That to me would be the best pairing, is Ryans as the head coach. I wanted Frank Reich as the OC, but that was always a pipe dream. But if you get David Shaw, for example, Jim Caldwell, you're killing two birds with one stone. And also the opportunity to raid Kyle Shanahan's staff for a quarterback's coach, line coach, et cetera, et cetera. There are upsides to it.
Mark Ward, what's up, brother? Appreciate you. He says all this waiting to find out what direction these new owners are going is making me lose more hair than Chad. I don't know, dude. You'll have to provide some proof, dog. I actually have more hair than you think. I just keep it easy, keep it bald. I embrace the bald. When it started, I'm like, yeah, the heck with this. I'm embracing it. Jason Cardoza in the hizzy. What's up, bro? By the way, Jason, if you're on Twitter, connect with us, because the last few times that you have super chatted, I've tried to find you to tag you on Twitter as a thank you after the show, and not sure. So do one of these in our mentions if you're on Twitter. We will connect with you. He says, good evening. With the Payton news basically flatlining overnight, I've been intrigued by DeMeco Ryans being the next man up. What would you say to Zach Anthony Lynn being the OC under an ostensible DeMeco Ryans regime? Denver Broncos for life.
It wouldn't be my first choice, but again, you're talking about a former head coach, guy with experience, someone that Ryans can lean on, and that experience would be invaluable because we saw how it played out with a first-time head coach and a first-time OC in Hackett and Justin Alden, and the answer to that is not good. I don't think, though, that it Lynn's on the radar. I've heard nothing about the Broncos being interested. And until we have more to go on, I'm going to assume the next OC could be from the group they've already talked to.
I cringe at the notion here that Scott puts in our private chat in the control room here that David Shaw is the fallback option. Oh man, that would be like, what's the phrase? Coitus interruptus. It'd be like that. It'd be aggravating, Zach. John Juno, appreciate you. If the Niners win in Philly, does that rule out Ryans? That's a good question, because even if you then say, no, we're going to pursue Ryans, he's our guy, you can get that second interview next week and you could get a deal done in principle or whatever, but your new head coach would not be able to walk through the doors of your facility till the third week of February. So, Zach, if the Niners won, how would it affect that outlook for Ryan's landing in Denver?
You just laid it out. It would throw a wrench into the Broncos' offseason schedule. You have the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl coming up. You have draft prep coming up, free agency prep coming up. You kind of want your head coach in place and you want your coaching staff in place before those major events. But if Ryans is the guy, then he's the guy. And I feel like the Broncos would be content waiting. One thing that Greg Penner preached constantly was patience, thoroughness. They're not going to rush. They're not going to expedite their process to appease the masses. They're going to take this on their own terms, and they could end up waiting him out. They could agree to terms right now. They just can't formally, like you said, introduce him until the Niners playoff run is over, one way or the other.
It's going to be an interesting throwdown for what it's worth, that NFC Championship game. Who do you got?
Man, if Jalen Hurts was 100%, I think I would have Philly, but they've been kind of a letdown in recent weeks. And I know because I had Jalen as my fantasy quarterback. And the Niners, momentum's a serious thing. I believe in that wholeheartedly in the NFL. And Kyle Shanahan's doing wizardry with Brock Purdy. That defense with DeMeco Ryans is humming. It's going to be a good game. I can't really have a sense of who's going to win. I could see it going either way.
I remember when it was unheard of for wild card teams to go the distance. And I don't just mean like you got in as a wild card team, but any team that had to play in the wild card round and go the distance. Now it's relatively commonplace. The Denver Broncos really, Zach, were the first team to kind of begin making that a thing, where you're talking about momentum. Used to be, oh, you want to get the bye so you can rest and then, come back for the divisional round and defend your season and try and advance. Well, now it's like there's something to having to play all three playoff games preceding the Super Bowl, because it can get you hot. You're either going to get hot in the playoffs and go the distance or not. In the Broncos, Super Bowl 32, that team, first team in a long time to pull it off. FA, bro, great to see you. Jersey is on the way. Don't forget to send us that selfie when it arrives, big dog. Appreciate your generosity. It says 3 out of the 4 teams in the championship game this year are all first-timers. Very interesting point. Taylor and Sirianni did call plays for their prior teams, although play calling matters. Having a good staff around you is equally important. Let's see how this shakes out. And then he goes on to say, I meant to say Sirianni and Taylor did not, call plays. The staff around them matters just as much. People are wanting Brian Callahan, that is, from the Bengals, but he also does not call plays. Let's give Ryans a chance if he is the pick, but I get it. We are scared. Yeah, a lot to unpack in these 2 super chats, Zach, but what do you say to the conversation starter of, 3 of the 4 coaches in these title games are first-time head coaches, not necessarily this year, but this is their first head coaching gig?
Listen, there's no data that correlates a first-time head coach or a coordinator with success or failure. You have to keep trying and swinging until you hit a home run. It's the same thing as finding a franchise quarterback. If you fail at that, and the Broncos know about this 3-4 times in a row, you can't be scared to get up to the plate. You have to keep swinging until you find your guy. So it's easier said than done for me or Chad or anyone. We're not involved in the hiring process. We're not Greg Penner, George Payton, etc. It's a matter of finding the right coach. It's what I've been saying all along. I don't care if it's Harbaugh, Payton necessarily, David Shaw, Dan Quinn. I just want the right coach for the Broncos. Unfortunately, we don't have the benefit of hindsight, and we won't know if that's the right coach until the games are played.
Here we have a third Big Baller super chat from FA, helping us keep the lights on here at MHH. Thank you, bro. He says, Ryans or bust The other candidates are meh, unless there is a dark horse candidate. Please, no David Shaw. How do the owners sell that to the fans? I know. That's why it's like, yeah, fallback would have to be a fallback. I mean, that would be a PR disaster. You would really be starting from negative, footing, so to speak. You talk about square one, you'd be starting at negative square one, maybe, because um, you're going to have that skepticism of not only first time NFL head coach, but a guy who's coming off of a tenure at Stanford where he only won 14 games in the final 4 seasons. Now, that was on the heels, for what it's worth, to make sure we have the full story here, of a very impressive initial tenure with the Stanford Cardinal. But do you want that negative momentum walking into your building as the guy that's supposed to fix this team that has missed the playoffs in each of the last 7 years and posted a losing season in each of the last 6? Good luck selling that. And that's a negative kind of cloud with the backlash that would certainly occur from that, to have a guy like Shaw start his tenure with.
Yeah, there's how it ended in Stanford, though. I tend to focus on the good that he did, and I tend to focus on his offensive acumen, his leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But I wouldn't like it, because if they go with Shaw, that would mean that Condoleezza Rice was at the forefront of that coaching decision. Condoleezza Rice. The Broncos are not going to war in Iraq. They're trying to find a head football coach. And I appreciate Rice being a part of the group. I know she's a big football fan, but the Stanford connection, it has to be beyond that. He has to get the job, if he does, based on merit, because he is better than DeMeco Ryans as a candidate. He is better than Sean Payton. He's better than anybody else. And I don't know how you quantify that. So I agree. It would be a unbelievably tough sell to the fan base, flirting with Harbaugh, flirting with Payton, and then settling on ... David Shaw.
But see, I'm not quite, it's weird. The articles I've written as of yesterday and today, I was becoming very bearish on the Sean Payton topic, and it's still pointing toward him returning to Fox. But him defending both the Broncos and himself on Twitter publicly, this is a rare thing. I know he's at media now, so being on Twitter is a little more commonplace, but as a bona fide candidate, it surprises me that he would go to bat like that, whether it were true or not. Okay, it's conspicuous, and it tells me that he's trying to keep that channel with the Broncos alive. What do you say about Ian Rappaport? By the way, Gary, love you, big dog. He says, looking forward to hearing from MHH about the head coaching news. Heck yeah, bro. And we look forward to continue breaking it all down with you and everybody else in the chat. The swashbuckling Gary Palmer. Love you, big dog. But what do you say, Zach, to the report from Ian Rappaport, who said it doesn't look like there's a place in the NFL right now for Sean Payton? Hasn't been able to garner that or lock in that second interview with any team yet.
I don't know what to believe anymore. My head is spinning the same as anybody else. It would say to me that Sean Payton, he dipped his toe in the water to take the temperature, and he found it was too cold. I think he thought he would have a bigger market or be more in demand than he really was. Maybe the Broncos weren't blown away. Maybe all along Jim Harbaugh was the number one guy, or maybe they did pivot to DeMeco Ryans. But there has to be a reason why these reports keep refuting themselves. There has to be some truth in the middle somewhere. I'll say this, though, about Sean Payton. He's been my number one guy, even during the Harbaugh flirtation. I would love for the Broncos to pick him up. But what does it say that he seems to be caring more about his market and his image and his PR perception and money? It's nothing that has to do with football or winning. It reminds me of the Aaron Rodgers saga. And I don't really want that energy or vibe in the Broncos locker room. I want a coach that wants to come to the Broncos because he wants to come to the Broncos. Point blank, period. Has nothing to do with the media, nothing to do with fueling rumors, speculation, using Colin Cowherd as a mouthpiece. I want a football coach that's ready to lead this team ASAP.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder what, in the case of DeMeco Ryans, who is a coveted coach. Thank you, Mike. It's great to see you, brother. Appreciate you being in the chat tonight. It makes you wonder, if you're DeMeco Ryans, you're in demand, you're popular, you've said no to 2 interviews, you've taken 2 others, Broncos, Houston. What is it that's attracting you to the Broncos job? Because in Houston, it would kind of follow the storybook line, right? He was a second round pick of the Houston Texans, went to Pro Bowls and earned an All Pro nod under the Gary Kubiak era Texans. And now he's got the chance to come back and be the head coach of the team that
And
drafted him. I mean,
his wife is from Houston too.
yes, wife from Houston. I mean, the storybook ending, it's just laid out for Houston. What is it about the Broncos, Zach, that you think he finds alluring? Is it, I mean, again, I hate to put it in this kind of a posture, but this is a team, this star, it's lost its luster, right? The Broncos, storied franchise, so much drama and so much just incompetence and failure over the last 7 years. What would draw a coveted guy like Ryans or Sean Payton? Any other reason besides the bag?
That's a really, really thought-provoking question that I haven't pondered. It's easy to assume what the Broncos like about Ryans, but what is Ryans like about the Broncos? We don't really know that. We don't know much about him as a candidate. He kind of came out of nowhere to assume this, front runner status. Working with a defense that's already a top 10 unit in place, I don't know, maybe the opportunity to carve his own path in the NFL, similar to his predecessor, Robert Saleh. I don't know, besides those two things and the money, what would attract him to the Broncos more than, like you said, storybook, going back to the team that you played for. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year, I believe, there as well. His wife has ties there in the Houston area. That would be the logical choice, but there's a reason the Broncos are coveting him so closely.
Dennis Chandler, thank you for the super chat, brother. He says, does it seem odd that Quinn decided to return to the Cowboys 2 years in a row? I just think it's one of those situations where, a lot of these stories end up being cards that are kept close to the vest in terms of, we learn a year later that Dan Quinn did not interview well last year. He wasn't impressive in his interviews. So you go, well, why didn't the Broncos give him that second interview? Why was it just hire Nathaniel Hackett? Well, Woody Page reported for the first time today that he did not interview well. All right, so he's got skins on the wall in terms of experience and what he's done with that Cowboys defense. Teams are interested in him. Obviously, he's a commodity. So why all of a sudden is he saying, no, I'm going to take my hat? It's hard to say. It's even possible, Zach, that Jerry Jones threw a little sweetener to get him to come back. He feels like they're in a window, want to capitalize, whatever the case may be. But it is weird. It's conspicuous. I don't have an answer for you. I haven't heard anything.
I mean, I think Dan Quinn's playing 4D chess here. He knows that Mike McCarthy's on the extremely hot seat, and one more, subpar season would mean McCarthy's ouster. And I think that Dan Quinn would be the logical successor to him. I think it's smart on his part, and I have a hard time believing that he wouldn't interview well. Every player that speaks out loves Dan Quinn. He's been an NFL coach before. I don't really know what to believe anymore, Chad. No offense to Woody Page or anybody else putting that out there, but it's been so topsy-turvy, it's thrown a wrench into everything.
Michaela jumping in to say, sorry, I've been gone so much. And another top row super chat. Wow. This is why she is legendary. This is why we love her. This is why she has become such an integral part of the MHH community. We love you, Michaela. She says, because I have missed you guys so much. Big exhale. Love you guys. Meet Bronco family. We love you too. And it was so fun. It's been so fun to get to hang out with you and all that stuff. And just glad to have you back. And much love and respect. You are thebomb.com.
No BS, Michaela. Scott, Chad, and I talk we have in the past when you were, dealing with your business about where you are. We miss you. We like seeing you around here. You are an integral, foundational piece of this community, of this podcast. Thank you so much for your generosity, as always.
Howie frickin' Day in the frickin' house to frickin' say, I can't frickin' wait. All right. To get our head coach hire out of the way, we need a break and some stability for Broncos fans. That's a good point on that subject, Zach, that I just want to rewind for a second. Why do you believe Dan Quinn wasn't a good interview? Maybe it's true and he wasn't a good interview, but let me put it to you this way. Scott brings up a good point, but here's how I'm going to posture it. Let's say there's a job out there that you maybe had, it was a sports media company that at one point in your life you idolized and you put on the list and whatever. And they called you up and they said, Zach, we want to interview you. And you had a pretty good idea going in that whatever the pay is, it's probably not going to be close to what you make now or whatever. But you do it because you don't say no to these type of things. And you go in, you're not really trying to get the job. You're doing it more, it's more perfunctory, right? You're more doing it for the respect of the ask or whatever. That's could be a similar thing, right? Like the way Scott put it, that my way was a little bit more long-winded, but Scott putting it like didn't interview well equals probably wants to stay in Dallas. So he's just taking them out of respect, but he's not really wanting the job. So he's not going to great length to put on, impressive presentations or go out of his way to really bond or impress anyone in the room, etc.
Maybe there's something to it, the psychological component, the human element to it. But if I was Dan Quinn, I'm sure he might be the highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL. We don't have those that information publicly accessible, but Jerry Jones did sweeten that deal last year. And if I'm making, I don't know, 5-6 a year as an assistant, and I know I'm pretty much grandfathered into a head coaching role in Dallas, I'm staying put. Why would I want to go to Houston or Carolina or Arizona or Denver with Russell Wilson when I can stay put with my guys and my system? I have a home here if I'm Dan Quinn. My kids are in school here, or whatever the case may be. Why uproot all of that to take a chance on the unknown? The devil you know versus the devil you don't know, as you like to say.
Very true. Taylor, brother, appreciate you. He says, does Ryans feel better than, say, a Vic and Joseph at first? I'll be honest with you. We were podcasting back then, but we weren't doing it as often and we weren't live. So the receipts might be a little bit harder for people to find, but I was always a little mystified by the VJ hire just because he was a relative no-namer guy, position coach in Cincy. Broncos liked him as a D coordinator under Kubiak. Then he gets finally out of the clutches of Mike Brown and the Bengals and gets that 1 year of defensive coordinator under his belt in Miami. And as Zach mentioned earlier, we're talking about a unit that he led to bottom 10 for sure. It was in the high 20s that the Dolphins finished in 2016 in terms of defense. And he's going to be your hire. He's the guy that's going to come in and carry the torch forward for your Super Bowl winning head coach, Gary Kubiak, who stepped down. I always questioned that. It was weird, but I hung my hat at the time on, well, the leader of men, let's see how this goes. And of course, it was just one disaster after another. He was way in over his head, not ready for the job. Vic, to me, Zach, made a lot more sense. There were red flags in terms of why is a guy who's coached in the league for 3+ decades, this is his first head coaching job, but there was enough of a body of work and a resume there to sink your teeth into. Ryans is oddly kind of bridging those two in a weird way and then adding on top of it. Only 2 years as a defensive coordinator, but he's a player he's a coach only 7 years removed from being a player. Only 7 years ago, he was the guy with the jersey on out on the field. There's something that guys, I mean, you had that article, Zach, that people, if they didn't see it, you should probably explain. DJ Jones going to bat for DeMeco Ryans as a candidate. He has an additional kind of juice to him that neither obviously Vic or VJ had.
Yeah, if y'all have Twitter, go on Twitter and type in DeMeco Ryans and look at videos. I mean, sideline videos, how he is as a coach, how he is as a person. He's a true natural leader. He's a true alpha, but he does so with the relatability. He does so having fun, but he also can drop the hammer on his players when it needs to be. I don't know what to really make of the past head coaching hires because none are comparable. It's like a snowflake. Every coach, every head coaching regime is unique on its own. But if only the Broncos had a better candidate in 2017, when they hired VJ, if only a Shanahan was available at that time, you could have had, I hate to jab the knife in your heart a little more, Broncos country, but it went from having maybe Kyle Shanahan and Wade Phillips to Vance Joseph and Joe Woods. So no one supported the VJ hire at that time. They interviewed 3 people, VJ, Kyle Shanahan, and Dave Tobe, the Chiefs special teams coordinator. 2019 comes around. Vic was my guy. I went to bat for him. I love the fact he was a defensive, quote, mastermind. He was grizzled. He was experienced. He hired a young up-and-coming offensive coordinator. There was a lot to like. But you don't really know until you know. You don't really know until the games play out and you can form conclusions and look at trends and this and that. Look at Hackett. Another guy that I went to bat for, Chad liked as well. A lot of people did. We all fell in love with his energy and we all got duped. We did not know how Hackett was going to be until the games finally played out. So I would hope DeMeco Ryans is better than VJ, better than Vic. Those are not high bars to get over, but we don't really know until we know.
That's right. A big part of this is you're rolling the dice, just like when you make a draft pick or sign a free agent.
Exactly.
You don't have the crystal ball. You're doing the best you can. Patriot text, brother. Thank you, bud. He says, Chad, I suppose the San Francisco connection is a big deal if it's Ryan's. After all, it was Shanny after his San Francisco tenure that brought us 2 Super Bowl wins. Good point. Mike Shanahan, after his falling out with Al Davis and the Raiders as head coach, went on to take the coveted offensive coordinator job in San Francisco, and he was the brainchild behind that Super Bowl winning team that got the monkey off Steve Young's back, and then he got the Broncos job. He says, you may talk me into Ryan's just yet. I just want to win again. Clayton, big dog, appreciate you on Facebook, saying, just want the right coaching staff for our team. Use all our talent to its full potential and back to the fundamentals. Well said. Sam Bam, brother, appreciate you. He wants to know, Zach, why do you think the Broncos didn't give Reich more, if any, consideration? Also, is there any truth to this Rob Walton being on a hunting trip and that delayed the second round of interviews? Seems like BS. First and foremost, though, what do you say? I'm mystified why they didn't want to talk to Frank Reich. I really don't understand that. But the only thing I can surmise is maybe they've heard things, I don't know, that we aren't privy to. But to me, he was one of the more choice options on when you got past the first initial kind of hyped sticker shock guys like the Harbaugh and the Payton. To me, he was the next most intriguing guy. The Broncos didn't even give him a sniff, Zach.
He's this year's Doug Peterson, where the Broncos just showed no interest in a experienced coach who had a pretty good resume. I wanted Frank Reich as OC. I would have warmed up to him as head coach, but maybe the Broncos heard that he was going to get a head coaching job, and sure enough, he did in Carolina. In terms of the hunting trip rumor, man, I don't know. I went to bat for Jeff Duncan on Twitter. He's a longtime Saints reporter, columnist, whatever, for NOLA.com. He's the one that came out, went on some, I guess, a radio show in New Orleans and said the reason that interview was delayed was that Rob Walton was on a hunting trip. And Broncos country melted down on Twitter, as they should have. And then he backtracked in a tweet that I was tagged in and said it was, I didn't expect it to blow up like I did, and I wasn't reporting anything. Yes, he was. He got caught. That's what his problem was, and he didn't want to get caught. And all the other insiders started to kind of refute that. So I don't know if there's any truth to that rumor. I read Kliss's piece today, and Kliss specified that Rob Walton has been involved in the process, as he should be. You can hunt any time of the year. Just get the head coaching hire done.
Patrick saying, if we get Payton, does this year's draft really concern us? Well, yeah. I mean, you're saying goodbye to your first rounder. Maybe you part with your third this year. I'm not sure exactly how it would unfold, how they would structure the draft picks that would go to New Orleans. But yeah, of course it would still concern you. It would lose a lot of its luster, unfortunately, in terms of the intrigue we all have about the draft. But it would be more about pinning your hopes on using those free agent dollars to plug what holes. And that's what you do anyway, right? In a perfect world, you use free agency as the method to which you actually go in and address your roster needs, so that, in theory, when draft day comes along, whether you have a full slot of picks in each round or you're not drafting till, the fourth round or whatever it might be, if that were the case for the Broncos, you're able to just take the guys that you see as the best player available. And it usually doesn't work out that way. But in this situation, Patrick, I would say then you would really be hanging your hat even more, hinging on free agency.
I look at it as a win-win, Chad. Either they end up with Sean Payton and he's the, the prize, the big sticker ticket, as you put it, Chad, or You get DeMeco Ryans and you have a true leader of men. You're probably upgrading at OC with a veteran candidate, and you're keeping your draft picks, your first round pick, your second or your third round picks, excuse me. To me, it's a win-win. I would like to have the capital, but if they can come to terms, a first round pick for Sean Payton, I think many Broncos fans are still signing up for that.
By the way, happy birthday, Patrick, and hope you're getting and feeling better with your knee recovery. Phil
Cheers.
McLaughlin down in Tucson, throwing down, holding down the fort, representing MHH and Broncos country with aplomb. Great to see you, bro. Timmy Shields in the house. What's up, big dog? He says, I live in NorCal, watch a lot of Niners games. Give me Ryans. Great coach, leader of men. He is my first choice. MHH for life and Broncos for life. Wear the bruise. Oi, oi. Yeah, a little no effects reference there. Love it, dude. Thank you, Timmy.
The day there's a rap reference on this show, Chad, I'm going to lose my freaking mind.
Well, all you got to do is share with people your love for rap and the different artists that you love and listen to, and then it'll come out of the woodwork. Trust. Cody Dub. Brother, good to see you. He says, could the Broncos have brought Shaw in that interview? Could it simply have been a OC kind of scratch and sniff? I don't know, Zach. I interpreted it at the time as a due diligence on if we're going to hire Jim Harbaugh, Jim floating Shaw as my number one choice for OC. But when he so quickly bowed out, it's like, well, and then we've heard other things since then. No, actually, I think he was brought in as a legit, let's see if this guy, we like him. We have a kind of connection through the Stanford thing. Let's see if how he would pitch the job and see what kind of feeling we get from him. And it's like Scott said earlier, he's the fallback option.
The nice thing, though, I don't know, a lot of Broncos country does not like David Shaw, and I kind of get that. But the nice thing, if you hire him and DeMeco Ryans, you're pretty much getting two head coaches, similar to when the Broncos hired Vic and then Mike Munchak as the OL coach. That's a double dip that I can get on board with. But out of house, if the Broncos want to look for an OC, maybe from the Shanahan tree, Brian Greasy, familiar name in Broncos country. He is the quarterbacks coach in San Francisco. Maybe that's an option. There's also, I think his name is Scott Slovic. He's the passing game coordinator in San Francisco. That's another name. So that's the beauty part about plucking DeMeco Ryans is that you're going to probably pick off Kyle Shanahan's assistants. And who wouldn't want to do that considering how the season has gone?
Brian Greasy, also former second-round pick of your Denver Broncos. So that would be interesting. David Kilgore, love you, big dog. Great to see you in the chat. Thank you for the super chat. A long-time Mount Rushmore super chat superstar here. He says, hey, guys, I just read that Peyton tweeted that he being out as Broncos head coach candidate is BS. So do we really have a shot at him, or is Ryan's a shoo-in? What he actually said, David, was he was refuting the report that he had some kind of a specific read on the Broncos ownership situation where he perceived a future, what did he call it, Zach, power struggle was the report.
Yeah.
And Sean Payton came out and said, I never said that. That's BS. I had a great experience talking to the Broncos, etc. So that's the Cliff Notes version if you're just joining us. And I do think it's still on the table. That's why he made the comment that he did on Twitter. That's why he took to Twitter to air this laundry, is because he's got a stake in this still. He doesn't want, it's not over as far as Broncos and Payton. Now, maybe they soured on him. I don't know. Maybe they cooled and they've kind of gotten more excited and intrigued by DeMeco Ryans, but hinges on what happens in the NFC title game because no one wants to wait till the third week of February to install a head coach. I don't know, but I don't interpret it any other way, Zach. Sean Payton taking to Twitter to refute a report on him as anything other than him trying to keep those channels open and positive with the Broncos.
It's either the Broncos are playing a game to lower the Saints' price or Sean Payton's price by leaking their interest in DeMeco Ryans, or they have genuinely cooled on Sean Payton and they are targeting DeMeco. We don't know yet. We'll know that obviously in due time. None of this was next level analysis, I know, but interestingly, and I hate to muddy the waters even more, Mike Kliss said yesterday, I believe, that there's a mystery candidate out there, and he goes, in about 5 days, the Broncos could have a new head coach that no one sees coming. Who is that mystery candidate? I don't know. Beats the hell out of me.
Yeah, that is interesting. Jasmine jumping in with this super chat. Jasmine, you've been so supportive of late of different MHH shows, and just know we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you. The ladies of Broncos country and the MHH community represent. She says, I am starting to think the Broncos organization loves to watch us panic. LOL. No, but I hope whoever we hire can help Russ in the offense speed this higher up. So that's a good question, guys, that you ask yourself relative to DeMeco Ryans. How does he help Russell Wilson?
I mean, directly, he helps Russell Wilson by hiring the right coordinator for Russell Wilson. Who that is, again, beats the hell out of me. It looked like Justin Alton was the right coordinator for Russell Wilson the last couple games, but maybe it's a David Shaw, maybe it's a Jim Caldwell, maybe it's a Brian Greasy. Indirectly, he can help Russell Wilson by taking control of the entire team, not letting the cracks in the foundation begin to surface, by being the true CEO, by keeping everything in order, keeping the locker room under control. And also, I know, Russ, if you're watching, which you're not going to want to hear this, but being a man to Russell Wilson, not being afraid of him, not trying to be his friend, being his coach. And if DeMeco Ryans would come into Dove Valley and he would say to Russ, listen, I'm really excited to coach with you, play, coach alongside you. I don't know. Share this opportunity in Denver alongside you. But listen, you're one of the 53. You're one of the guys. No more private offices, no more private chiropractors, no more private quarterback coaches. You are one of the rest. That's how you help Russell Wilson. And that's what Russ needs more than anything right now.
Well said. The Duchess, again, with another super. Love you. She says, so when will we find out who our next head coach is, in your opinion? Zach, my prediction is sometime before Wednesday of next week. That's my prediction.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that might sound like, well, geez, Jensen, you're giving yourself a little slack there. But we know they can't talk to Ryans till Monday at the soonest. So if that ends up truly, as Kliss was hinting today, as the top target, and it goes well, and they say he's our guy, there's not going to be an announcement or of a deal in principle or whatever till Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday-ish. So that would be, and I think, if things don't go well in that second interview, or if they end up winning that NFC title game, it could totally change the complexion of that interview completely. And the pendulum, Zach, could then swing to somebody else, and they can make pretty short work of hiring somebody. So I think sometime between now and Wednesday would be my best guess. They hired, for what it's worth, Nathaniel Hackett last year, January 25th. So they've already exceeded that. But that was before it was a 17-game season, for what it's worth.
I'm going to be a little more aggressive and say they'll have the announcement out there by Monday. And I have kind of a theory to myself that Ryans and the Broncos, if he's the guy, we don't know that, but if he's the guy, they have kind of a wink handshake agreement in place, and that will be announced on Sunday night right after the NFC title game. Because DeMeco Ryans, he said on record, his focus is his focus right now, which is the 49ers. I don't think he'd want it to come out before the biggest game of the season that he's leaving for another job. If it comes out before the Super Bowl, if they make it that far, that would be a little more palatable if you're a player of his. So I'm going to say by Monday, we should know one way or the other.
Mark Ward, again, thank you, bro. He says, Brian Greasy also threw the interception that Terrell Davis was trying to make a tackle on that injured his knee and his career. Yes, I'm still holding that grudge. Yeah, but it was just bad luck, dude. It was just the way that cookie crumbled. Still landed in the Hall of Fame. And I got to tell you, I don't think those 2 or 3 years, well, a little bit longer, those 3 or 4 years in between, Elway 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2000. So those 3 or 4 years in between Elway and the Plummer era, I don't think they would have been made or broken by the presence of Terrell Davis, just because, that was a team that was kind of relearning how to win. A lot of its stars from the Super Bowl teams had moved on, and so I don't hold that same grudge. But Deanna, Lady D in the house, what is up? Great to see you. Another Mount Rushmore superstar in the house. Ladies of MHH representing in force, saying, I'm sick of this. Payton is the one. He's out. He's in. What the heck? I'm disappointed in ownership in this hiring process. It's January 26th, and we've lost a lot of great coaches. What is really going on? Hashtag so frustrated. Well, if you believe that Greg Penner is being meticulous, comprehensive, I think there's some truth to that. And then also, Mike Kliss, that same article today, Zach, where he was saying that Ryans is the top choice, or a top choice is the actual verbiage he used. He said that basically they did the first round of interviews, and then kind of they're circling back, like he's chewing on things, getting their ducks in a row, and now they're refocusing on what comes next. What does come next and who's on the priority list, that's what remains right now in question. And it sounds like the ticker's trending towards DeMeco Ryans. But as I told you, if I hadn't seen that Sean Payton tweet tonight, Zach, before we went live, I would be a lot more bearish, telling people like, cool your jets. Probably time to just start expecting that Sean Payton's going to return to Fox. But that gave me a little bit of a he's putting himself out on a limb there to smash a report on behalf of this Broncos thing. It's still alive. It might not be the most important thing for the Broncos, but it's a channel that is important, obviously, to Sean Payton to keep positive and alive.
It's either that or it's a parting message, like I said, a thank you, goodbye, whatever, and just a nice way to go out. Deanna, I appreciate your generosity as always, but I question, though, what are the great coaches the Broncos have lost? Frank Reich is the only one who's gotten a head coaching job that we know of so far, and the Broncos were not in on him. They've lost Tyrone Wheatley, their running backs coach. He's at Ball State now, their new head coach. And everyone's old friend, Nathaniel Hackett, former Broncos head coach. Get this, guys, if you haven't seen it, I wrote up the story earlier today. He is now the new New York Jets offensive coordinator. And what do you think that's going to precede? A potential Aaron Rodgers trade. All I got to say is this. There's been a lot of propaganda, not to make it a Hackett, tangent right now. There's so much propaganda coming out of New York after this hire. Albert Breer called it a political war that Nathaniel Hackett lost in Denver, which is ridiculous. Robert Salah said himself, whatever you want to call Denver, I'm excited to have Nate and this and that. What I want to call Denver was largely Hackett's doing. So again, good luck. He's your problem now, but we should report that news because it's official.
Always try to get one from our Twitch community. JB1789 wondered, Zach, could that mystery candidate Kliss was hinting at, could it be Shane Steichen?
I'm going to tell you who I think it is. I don't think it's Steichen, who's up for a couple jobs as it is right now. And I might be totally wrong. And maybe Kliss is putting it out there for the sake of putting it out there. We don't know. Kellen Moore. And I say that because he's interviewed well. He interviewed with the Broncos last year. He's an offensive-minded guy, younger guy. If they're going for a first-timer, if they're that open-minded about DeMeco Ryans, maybe that mystery candidate is Kellen Moore. But I still doubt that.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe it could be Steichen. Maybe it could be Kellen Moore. I'm not sure. They've kind of thrown me for a loop. I'm not going to lie. I'm feeling a lot like a lot of you are right now, kind of don't know which way is up relative to this Broncos head coaching search. But, Mike, appreciate you. Guys, we're right up against it. So unless there's any other burning topics you want to get in the chat, we're going to wind down the show with a few messages for you, and then we're going to dip on out of here.
I'm going to laugh so hard, though, when the Jets don't acquire A-Rod, like he retires and they're left with Zach Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett. Have fun with that. But that was the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod, the main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle, Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our glorious producer at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch, you know what it is, where it is, check it out, huddleuppod.com, and get your merch on. If you haven't, go to facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. Be sure you're liking that page and following that page. And guys and gals, if you haven't, go to Apple Podcasts and leave your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some of that merch each and every month. But if anything, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans. Come on, Chad. Just
like you, baby. Heck yeah. Sorry, I got a little excited there.
You're good.
Shout out to these great Super Chat superstars and supporters tonight, throwing down, helping us keep the lights on here at MHH. Starting with Timmy Shields, Patriot Tech, Sam Bam, Mark Ward, Jason Cardoza, John Juno, F.A., Gary Palmer, Dennis Chandler, the Duchess, Michaela Parker, Taylor Christensen. Let's see. Cody, David Kilgore, Jasmine, and Lady D. That is on YouTube. And then Facebook, Michael Ronquillo, love you, big dog. Howie Frickin' Day, Clayton Huron, Phil McLaughlin, Patrick Wiltsey, and Lawrence Rivera. Much love and respect, everybody.
We're off until Sunday night, guys. Have a great ending to your week, great start to your weekend. Take care, and as always, go Broncos.